There's few people who haven't heard of Jersey and Guernsey. You know, out in the Channel there are these islands known as the Channel Islands. Probably not the only one who kind of assumed they'd be closer to the UK. I mean, I used to sort of assume they were kind of here rather than tucked in Normandy's armpit. But sure, we all have a vague notion that, you know, they're out there somewhere. But ask someone, you know, myself included, circa 2018, to locate Sark on a map. I don't know, I probably would have glanced up at, like, the Isle of Man and been like, nah. So, okay, it's here. It's off to the east of Guernsey. Not that one, that's Herne. It's there. So even from the map, you can see it's geographically interesting. Politically, it's bonkers, but we'll get to that later. Either way, having ticked Jersey and Guernsey off the list, this was the next largest landmass that was beckoning. Also, if you've been keeping score, we are currently 2-0 down when it comes to completing a successful lap of any of the Channel Islands. I thought I had a shot with Guernsey, but then I realised I was being over-optimistic, and with Jersey being the largest, I actually got further than I expected, but again, was not all that surprised when... no. But finally, now this is more doable. Sark is only 5.5 square kilometres in area, so finally I can actually do one of the laps I keep dropping in the title. Okay, getting there. Well, surprise, surprise, an island only 3 and a bit miles in length and 1.5 miles wide does not have an international airport, so it's principally accessible by boat from Guernsey. So one ferry crossing to Guernsey later. The number of ferries to Sark varies depending on the season, but compared with trying to get to Alderney, they're pretty plentiful. We'll have more on that particular ballad another time. It ended up arriving 20 minutes late, actually, but yeah, whatever. It was also a good chance to get some slightly shaky footage while passing Herne. We're going to get there eventually too, but not this time around. The real treat was passing the north coast of Sark. I hadn't realised just how tall the cliffs would be, and yeah, a bit of boat wobble notwithstanding, these were pretty spectacular. Now, Sark is also encircled by all manner of small islets and just random rocks jutting up at various points. It still kind of weirds me out to think that as little as a few thousand years ago, the Channel Islands were still connected to the European mainland. I mean, yeah, if you look out at the vastness of the sea, if it were just a little bit lower, this would be connected to Normandy by land. You could just walk there. So the harbour is actually on the east of the island, so we'd got a good view of the northern half by the time we'd landed. There is actually a small tax you have to pay to land on Sark, but this is included in the cost of the ferry ticket, so you probably won't notice. So this seems like a good time to cover some of the miscellany of Sark, and there's a lot that's just like a little bit different. For starters, there are no cars allowed on the island, and oh boy, do they like to remind you of it. However, guys, if you're going to use this as a selling point, I think the sheer number of tractors is kind of hurting your case here. I mean, in the 2 minutes and about 40 yards since we've walked off the ferry, we'd already seen 5 tractors. I counted. It's so nice to be out of the noise of the city and enjoy the tranquility of the outdoors. So yeah, put a mental asterisk next to that one. In a parallel example, they're also very proud of their dark sky status. Again, you know, that's cool. Don't really have anything snarky to say about that. But I wasn't there at night, so I can't attest to how impactful this is. The few dark skies locations I have been to, I'd say the atmospheric conditions, particularly clouds, are more likely to interfere with your stargazing, but yeah, I mean, it's nice to have. Sark is also too small to have its own flag. Oh, psych. There is the obligatory low-angle flag flying shot. I think that bait and switch would have been more effective if I hadn't done the exact same joke for Guernsey 2 episodes ago. Where things really make your head hurt is when you start to talk about Sark's political status. You might think it's just part of the British Isles, but guess again. Okay, now at this point in the episode, I was going to take a bit of a left turn and do a little animated explainer of the legal status of Sark and how it makes laws. Yeah, I think it's that classic thing. You look at a CGP Grey video and be like, yeah, I could do one of those in a weekend. Yeah, but I think this is not helped by the fact that I'm demonstrably not an animator. I mean, anything that moves in these shows that isn't just the camera is me pulling around the location coordinates in Premiere. But the legal status of Sark is the sort of edge case that you set law students for them to bang their heads against because it's so obtuse. Like, they're under the sort of legal umbrella of Guernsey, but also have some direct representative to the Queen, or I should say the Crown, but that is not the same as having a seat in Parliament, which they don't. And look, I really doubt that as I'm going through all of this, people are moving to the edge of their seats like, yes, go on, we want to hear more. But worst of all, this is the worst possible time to try and make a video like this, because once Brexit hits, and even saying that in past tense is not very future-proof, because if you look at the description, this came out at the tail end of 2020. All of this may in fact go completely out the window. At a time of writing, the state of the Channel Islands post-Brexit is a black hole in the shape of a question mark. So, what would be the use? The half-life of that information, well, it's going to be in date for about the same length of time as a Muller yoghurt. Just forget it. Back to our trip in specific, we ducked left onto the path around the edge of the island. It was a small patchwork of farmers' fields, right up until you're close enough to the cliffs for the bramble and gorse to take over. Here and there, there'd be a cannon left out, or, like Guernsey, some form of rusted old iron machinery. After a couple of wrong turns, we stumbled out onto our first waypoint of the day. Time to bring out the Hysteria channel filter.
The thousands of years ago, the majestic circle of Sark
was not there. Yeah, it was put up in 2015, which makes it about 4,500 years too young, but still, not complaining. We went down this peninsula, mistakenly assuming it was part of the coastal path, but while the views were spectacular, we had to then double back and retrace our steps. As we came around, we entered a lush green copse with the sun dancing off the mossy floor, passing the occasional house. It turned into a pretty hot August. Oh, grief, was this really August? I've got to stop giving away when these are filmed. It's embarrassing how long ago this was. This was the first actual cafe, or in fact vendor of any kind we'd encountered. This was Cara? I think that's how it's pronounced. We grabbed a quick espresso, and then we were only a short stride from this. This is La Coupe, though I feel like they missed a trick not calling it the Sarcasm. It's an incredible view off in all directions. It's no surprise that this is the view that leads most publications or adverts for Sark. Beaches cascading off on both sides far below. It's just beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, this was built by slaves. Yeah, they took some German prisoners of war and said, hey, you know how the Declaration of Universal Human Rights won't be signed for another 3 years? Yeah, so I guess you're going to be working for us now to build a concrete road across this yawning chasm. So yeah, that takes the edge off the view just a little bit. To be clear, there had always been a road between the islands. You can see from these 19th century illustrations it was an incredibly romantic looking death trap. Things get weirder too. You remember Sark's distinctive shape with chunks jutting out? Well, to the west, that's Brecau, and it is most certainly severed from Sark, though only by a tiny dribble of ocean. Brecau is its own can of worms. It's owned by fun-loving oligarchs, the Barclay brothers, who, after purchasing the island in 1993, have But back to this part of Sark, which is still very much attached, actually has much more of a case for being a separate thing. You get this. So Sark has its own language, pretty impressive for an island boasting only 500 people. It's called Sarquois, or Sarquois, something like that. Apparently there's only 20 speakers left as of 2014, but better yet, somehow, for an area smaller than a modest-sized music festival, Little Sark over the centuries developed its own dialect. I mean, how insular do you have to be when you are speaking a different language than the residents of the same 2.1 square mile island? The anthropologists can unpick that one for us, but it is impressive. So, let's see what this sprawling metropolis has to offer. Well, defying all expectations, it's sparsely populated with a pretty coastline. Who'd have thought? There's these towers from some old silver mines there. We've done a fairly good job on our lap so far of hugging the coast, though at this stage we were pretty much just having to take the footpaths as they came. We got to the southern tip of the island and the views were incredible, though the temperatures that day were somewhere between a bread oven and my eyes are emitting a high-pressure steam as the contents of my tear ducts boil. For non-UK residents who, unlike us, are used to genuinely hot temperatures, it's probably topped out around 27 degrees. We had a side quest to complete. I wanted to catch the dolmen on Sark. This is essentially the only Neolithic site that's left, compared to the other Channel Islands, as they are practically sinking under the weight of all the Neolithic stuff scattered everywhere. I'd spotted it from where we were standing, and you could see a footpath trodden along the path of the cliff, thin though it was. So we set off, resuming our lap of the outer edge, to cut a long route short. After awkwardly jumping a few barbed wire fences that were very inconsiderately blocking our progress, we were greeted by a wall of gorse that no amount of creative orienteering was going to get us round. So after about 20 minutes of hard-fought progress along the rather uncomfortably narrow cliff ledge, I know it doesn't look like it on camera, but video isn't very good for height and depth scaling. With more than one occasion where I nearly left behind a beautiful widow, we had to rather embarrassingly admit defeat and retrace our steps. It's kind of funny, by following what looked like a plausible path, I mean, you can even see it from above on maps, we actually just helped tread down the ground to mislead future generations of walkers who have the same idea. So one piece of sage advice I can give you for your visit, even though it looks walkable, don't take the path along the eastern edge of Little Sark. Doubling back up the hill a short way, I joined the true path, which went through an unreasonably picturesque sheep field, then rounded the corner, and there it was. If ancient history isn't your thing, then yeah, this isn't exactly going to light your gorse on fire, but hey, it's about 4,000 years old. That's kind of cool. Though we'd lost about an hour having to retrace our steps, and while that doesn't sound like much, we only had a couple left before the ferry was due to leave. We were in dire need of a proper drink, so we stopped off here at pretty much the only business on Little Sark. It's the tea room at La Sablonnerie, with a very nice garden, though scarcely another human being in sight, even at the height of summer. So we were kind of running out of time. Quickly back across La Coupe, and we were following the central path onto the main centre of Sark. Because we'd skirted the western edge, we hadn't actually seen the built-up... built up is a bit much, but the bit of Sark that actually has buildings. This isn't quite as compelling on camera as the soaring cliffs. Unsurprisingly, once you're out of sight of the sea, this doesn't look entirely dissimilar to just a remote bit of the English countryside. We poked our heads into the Seigneurie for coffee, but it was already closed by 4, so we missed the gardens other than a glimpse, which was a shame because they're one of the more notable attractions on the island. But also because not only was our time running out, but we were only about 2/3 of the way up the main island and we had to turn back, so we didn't miss the ferry. So we were retracing our steps back to the harbour. It's subtle, but some of the small touches make you feel like you're back in the 1950s or possibly an Enid Blyton adventure, and that has its charm. There's the odd bank here and there, so the illusion isn't preserved perfectly. So you can't get completely immersed in the place as a time capsule, but there's still 500 people who have to live there, so insisting they exist in some sort of open-air museum fantasy cosplay land isn't exactly fair. Down the steep hill to the harbour, we just had time to see a surprisingly beautiful cove that almost had an amphitheatre-like quality to it, and then, after a short queue, it was back on the boat. Once again, was fighting the swaying of the boat to get a bit more footage. Got a better view of Breckout and the Barclay Doom Fortress. Sorry, I suppose that's not really fair. It's really more of a Doom Chateau. So even though we saw almost all of the island between the panorama of the northern tip from the boat, the views of the eastern coast all the way south and then back up through the middle, that is still conspicuous for not counting as a complete lap. So for the 3rd video in a row, it's Channel Islands 3 completed laps, nil. I mean, I guess if we had tried to literally lap the island in 6 hours on a very hot day, it would have made the whole trip a lot less enjoyable. And, I do have really fond memories of the day. As far as recommendations go, yeah, for the cliffs and the views, it really is quite something. Of course, whatever you do to get there, you'll have to at least route through Guernsey, unless you're a private yacht owner. There's no direct way to get there yourself. And you probably can't make it from your house to Sark and back in a day. So you'll probably be having to stop over somewhere, either in Guernsey or maybe on Sark itself. I mean, I struggle to see what you do for any more than about a weekend. 3 days and upward, I think you'd start to find the whole place a little bit limiting, but that is pure speculation. In fine weather, you might be able to spend a very serene week there. And hey, I mean, that's part of the charm. Let's be honest, it's going somewhere less known. The very fact that many people haven't heard of Sark and almost no one could correctly identify it on a map. So yeah, even though it's a bit of an out-of-the-way spot to get to, if you're already putting together a Channel Islands itinerary, then definitely carve out a day to go visit. So that's all from the Channel Islands for now. I have unfinished business here. We've yet to set foot on Herm or Alderney, which was the original plan when this was going to be a 5-part series, but then 2020 happened. But keeping it island-shaped, for the next episodes, we're actually shifting all the way down to the Adriatic for the Ionian Islands. That's Corfu, Kefalonia, and Zakynthos. So expect those soon. I try to keep it light on calls to action on this channel, as peppering episodes with constant commands to subscribe, like, comment, and
Send us for the both bodies of your offspring
is one thing that makes YouTube tedious, but we are a small channel right now, and even just a couple of subscriptions is still a really big deal. Even the small gestures really do mean a lot. And hey, do check out the EP too. We put a lot of time into these, and believe me, it means a lot when people take the time to listen to our music. Thanks for the support, and catch you guys again very soon.